Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am back with another emergency card kit video. We have new add-ons today to go along with kit 58. We've been working on masculine cards and today we're going to make two pop-up cards using new free downloads that coordinate with the original kit. So this is kit 58, the original download. It has themes of the outdoors, sports, and working with your hands. And we have a bunch of sentiments and a bunch of different shapes and sizes along with a card sketch and then some digital paper. And I love the digital paper, but I wanted it to be able to do a little more. So today we're going to take this scene that has the boat on it, and I have a new file for you so you can use the background separate from the boat. And then I promised you last time, I thought I was going to have time to make a pop-up tent card for you, and we didn't get to it. So we have this background and I've already printed that out, but I have a new file for you to help you to create the pop-up tent. All right, here are the files you're going to get. This first one down at the bottom is ECK 60.2 Outdoor Add-ons. That is a PDF like normal, and we're going to look at that in just a moment here. The rest of these are SVG and silhouette files. I don't have a Cricut that I know how to use yet, so I think there are files in here that will translate to a Cricut, but I'm not sure. So as we're going through all of this, if any of you is more familiar with a Cricut than I am, please let us know what to do and how this should work. And if I get a comment like that, I will pin it towards the top so that everyone can see it. So we'll come back to those cut files, but for now, we're going to use just the PDF and we're making this pop-up card. It says, "Our love is like camping, intense." We'll have the pop-up tent on the middle. It's so easy. I promise you're going to have a lot of fun with this. I'm using the Clouds and Grass Slimline dies from Pixie Dust Designs. I really love this grass. It's a favorite of mine. Then the Backyard Haven window from Spellbinders. We're just pulling the tree out of that one. And then the up in the air view for these clouds. There are lots of die sets you could use to create sort of an outdoor scene on the front of your card. I really like making this look like a very Sarah die cut heavy card from the front without having to go into like crazy detail. There's no ink blending. I'm not going over the top because the over the top is on the inside. So I just cut that from a scrap of green and then I glued it kind of towards the middle. I wanted the hill towards the left. There are two grass dies in that set and one is sort of straight across and then there's one that has like little peaks and valleys in it, little hills. And so that let me line it up exactly where I wanted it and I just trimmed off the excess. I have added on the trunk of my tree, but I didn't glue those branches all the way down at the ends so that I could tuck pieces behind it. There are two big pieces of greenery for your tree, and I've cut it out of two shades of green cardstock, and I'm just alternating. There are also like individual little leaves you can glue on there if you're really wanting to get a very full, lush look. There's tons of other pieces in there too. There are flowers and an owl, a bird house. There's like a bird feeder and a squirrel and a tire swing. It's a really, really great set. These came out with the big picture window, maybe last winter. And the whole collection is just absolutely stunning. So I love this one a lot. But again, we're kind of making masculine cards this month. And then actually we're going to pull this into next month too. If you missed it, I released a video earlier this week trying to figure out what exactly to do with these kits because they keep getting bigger and bigger. And so twice a month is too much for me. So I asked people if they wanted smaller kits more often or one big kit a month, and sort of overwhelmingly people are saying one big kit and then we'll do add-ons like this one where you get extra pages and rewinds back to older kits that maybe people don't even know exist or they've forgotten that they are still there. And so I'm really excited about where everything is headed. Please know that that means that the other masculine kit, the big kit coming, is going to be the 4th Friday of the month instead of the 3rd Friday. So I have finished adding all my pieces. I have a spot on that bottom right corner for our sentiment. I trimmed off the excess and then I'm pulling in our background for the inside of our card. This is just ever so slightly bigger than 8.5 by 5.5. I really didn't want to have to worry or have you have to worry about trimming it perfectly and then it being slightly smaller than an A2. So I have a little more printing than I need, but just a sliver on each side. So here it is, and I am just going to stick this in my scoreboard. It's exactly 5.5 inches, but I'm scoring it 4.25, and then I'll fold it in half. And if there's any excess, I'll trim that away. I have already trimmed out part of our tent. I trimmed 3 of the sides right up to the color, but I left that 4th side. There is a little tick mark there in case you don't have a scoreboard, or just to remind you, you need to score it in the middle. So it is 5 inches wide. So I scored it 2.5. That's where that little tick mark is. And then from here, I can trim away each of those white squares in the corner. They are 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. So once they're gone, I get this sort of fat, wide cross shape. I need to score the flaps on each of the 4 sides. So the flaps are 3/4 of an inch, and I'm just going and kind of using my eyeballs and my scoreboard and connecting where that paper is missing in the corners, right? Super easy. You don't have to worry too much about measurements when you do it this way. You can see on the long flap, there are some very faint diagonal lines. This is maybe the trickiest part of it, and part of why I wanted to create a print out for a tent, because this shows you exactly where you need to create your score lines. I am using a stylus that has a pretty small metal tip and a ruler, and just lining it up over top of those score lines. So it's going from the corner to that center score line on the flap, okay? If you don't have a stylus like this, you can use a ballpoint pen that doesn't work anymore. It leaves a really nice groove. Typically, the little ball still rolls in there, and so you don't tear your paper. I'm folding all of my flaps towards the white side of my paper, and then I will fold very carefully along those diagonal lines. I printed this, right? I didn't want to remove any of that printing. I probably didn't need to worry about it. I used my inkjet here, but with my laser printer, sometimes you can scratch off the toner. Less of a problem for something like this, and the inkjet. So I am folding so that I am sort of creasing along those score lines towards the white side of my paper. And then you just sort of stick your finger into the middle of it, and it will fold flat, and you'll have this triangle that butts to the outside. Okay, so here it is. Both sides have that little triangle. I need to glue those triangles together, the ones that touch when you close it. I don't want the glue to smear, so I'm just using my finger and keeping it really, really thin and on one side, and then I'll press everything flat. And there we go, right? All of a sudden, I have these 2 tent flaps that touch each other when I go to open up the tent. So I'm doing the same thing to the other side, and I'll sort of tuck that in with my finger and press it flat. Okay, so then I end up with this shape. When I go to stand this up, and I'll stick my side flaps underneath, you can see that the triangles we just glued are too long. So I'm just kind of holding it in the air, and I will use my scissors to trim away the excess and create a flat line. That's going to sit flush against my card when it's opened up. So it's really important to trim that away. Here's my card base. I have a score line right down the middle. Okay, and here is my tent. I'm going to fold it flat again, and here is my long flap. I am going to add glue only onto that long flap. Don't go beyond the score line. And I'm using what looks like a lot of glue, but it's a very thin layer. I want to butt this right up into the fold of my card and press it flat. I want to make sure that my card is going to close and everything sits flat. Then when I open it, it sort of sticks to one side, and I'm going to lay it flat again and add glue onto that other flap. Only the flap, okay? And so then glue all over, really thin, and fold everything shut again. Don't try to eyeball it with the tent open. If I had any patience, I would wait before I opened that back up, but instead I was just very careful. And you can see here is my tent. It's perfect. It hides inside the card. I love this so much. So I am going to add my die cut panel onto the front of that card base that we made out of our printed background. You guys, I hope you love this as much as I do. Like, I've been dreaming about this card. And I thought I was going to make it in the initial release video for this kit, but then I decided I wanted the extra printable to go with it. Oh, So here we are. I felt like this felt lopsided. I printed onto 80-pound cardstock and I have a very sturdy front. So to keep the back from feeling flimsy, I am adding just an A2 panel of 100-pound white cardstock on there, just for a little added sturdiness. And then all I need to do is trim off any excess, because usually there's excess. I don't usually cut everything right the first time, and then we'll add our sentiments. These are coming from kit 58, and so I'm going to start with the circle sentiment version that says, "Our love is like camping." Friends, I went camping one time with my husband. Once, for one night. I was like, okay, thanks. I'm good here. The outdoors and I'm just not cut out for it. I burn so easily, but I loved him enough to go. So then for the intense, right? Intense. It's pun. Anyway, my 10-year-old will explain to you all day how that's a pun and you're supposed to laugh at him. I'm using this strip sentiment version for intense. And I am just sort of squaring this off. I have to cut a bunch of these in a row because it's quite a ways up those strip sentiments. Do you guys skip around on these? Sometimes I do, but I always regret it. So I'm just trimming away. And once I get to that intense, I will sort of cut this a little differently than normal. So I'm going to create a little sort of flag on the end, or just a diagonal cut. I'm also adding a matte layer that is 3/8 of an inch, and I want that same diagonal angle on that matte layer. So I'll just line up my white piece on top of the blue, cut right along that same edge, and then I can scoot the whole thing to the right, and my top, bottom, and left edge have the exact same margins, and my angle is correct. So I wasn't sure at first where I was going to put this, but I knew I just want it to be like this tiny little punch line, and down on that bottom right is going to work really, really beautifully for me. I know a lot of times I add these sentiments with removable adhesive, but this is only ever going to get a tent themed sentiment. Like, that's obviously right. So this is it, and real glue on some of them. Here's our tent, and you can kind of see how it closes, and that tent just sort of folds flat in there. I love it so much. So here's a little peek at card number 2. It has a pop-up on the left, and then you can see our boat hangs out over the water like it's floating, and we have a little place on the back to write our greeting. We're using the rest of our files to make this card. I can't wait to show it to you. I hate fussy cutting, so these other 4 files are hopefully to help you avoid that. I have a Silhouette Studio file for the boat print and cut. I also saved that same file as an SVG. I'm hoping you can import that into a Cricut. Let me know if that's the case. I've also saved it as a PNG with a transparent background. And then this last one, most people won't need, but my silhouette is like a temperamental teenager. So I'll show you that in a minute. This is our Silhouette Studio file / the SVG file. There are 3 pieces. Here's my boat, and it has a cut line around it. I've set that up for you already. And I think when you open the file, it will already have it set up with these registration marks. If not, I can go into page setup. That's this top right here. And then when I click on this far right option, you can turn those registration marks on and off. You want them on, okay? So over here, it says number 1 is your boat. Number 2 is the extra boat outline. You can see in here that it is a very delicate set of oars. And so I like to cut them twice. Print once, cut twice, and then I can stack them up and make it just a little bit sturdier. If you aren't great at peeling off very delicate images from a sticky mat, I highly recommend that you just remove these inner pieces. Then I have number 3. It is the Acetate open-sided boat, and I will show you this in a little bit, but to get started, I'm going to drag that off of my mat. I'm going to hit Control P for print, or I can go into File and Print, and then you just click Print. You choose your printer, and it should be perfect. For some reason, my laptop doesn't like to connect to that printer through Silhouette Studio. So then I have this boat print and cut for Silhouette. That's another PDF. It looks like this. So it's just the boat with those registration marks in case yours is as temperamental as mine. If you use that PDF, make sure that you are not moving this boat at all. That's the only way that it matches the registration marks. Once I have this printed, I'm going to align this in the top left corner of my mat, and then I can go to send. There are several ways you can tell it which pieces to cut. I like to go to line. All the cut lines are in red, so you can see them here. This is toggled on. And then I am telling it I'm cutting 80-pound heavy cardstock with my auto blade. Then I will click send, and it will cut out all those pieces. Next, I want to cut this other piece out of acetate, but since I might do another print and cut, I don't actually want to move these. So I'm going to come up here and open a new layout, and then I'll just come over here and hit Control C for copy and Control V for paste. I'm going to put that in the top left corner. I don't need a print and cut. I'm not printing at all. And so I have my red outline that I want to cut. I'm going to go to send, and then you can choose your material. I want to cut on acetate. It says acetate thin. Mine is not thin. I am using Grafix shrink film. It is heavyweight, crystal clear, absolutely gorgeous. I didn't think it would cut, but it did. So acetate, auto cut blade. I can tell it we're using the line version. It really sort of emphasizes what's getting cut. But again, acetate, auto cut, and send. Once I got my pieces cut, we could start on the card. This is a piece of 8.5 by 5.5 inch cardstock, and I'm gonna cut 3/8 of an inch off of one side. It looks like less than that, but it wasn't enough, so I trimmed more later. So cut 3/8 of an inch. Then you're gonna score at 1.5, 2, 3.5, and 4. That's all the scoring we need to do. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold all of these in the same direction. So they're all going to be mountain folds. In the description box below, I will link back to a video from the stepped up version of Kit 32. It was another masculine card kit from last spring. And it has a whole printable page with measurements for a card much like this. The measurements are slightly different, but it's the same idea. Once I've burnished all my score lines, I'm folding so that this edge of my card is right up against the center score line. And then I can just pick it all up and everything is perfectly flat. That's really important. I am adding glue only onto that 1.5 inch flap that's right along the edge. Then I will once again fold the large flap on top of it so everything is flat. This way it will fit in an envelope. And then I can carefully lift the box and I get this really great pop-up card. It's super flat when it goes in an envelope and I love it so much. It's really, really versatile. Here I used our new PDF and I cut down that background to 4.25 by 5.5. And now I'm trimming off 1/8 of an inch from either side. I want just a little bit of that blue cardstock showing so that this feels more like a handmade card. Then I need to cut the strip that will fit on the left. So that is 1 3/8 of an inch, right? And then the piece that's left will fit perfectly on the other side. So in the middle, you can see the dimension, but they meet up exactly. And then we have those tiny strips on the left and the right that I really love. It's a great pop of sort of brighter color. Then I have my 2 boats. One I printed and cut, and then the other one was just from the leftover cardstock that was in that same run, right? There's the 2 boats in that file, so I glued them together. Then here's my acetate, and you can see there's a cut line that goes all the way around the outside of the boat, except on the right. So I am adding a little bit of glue all over the back of my boat with my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'm tapping off any of that excess on the oars so it doesn't ooze out and you can see it on the acetate. And then I will just set this right into that cut line. This is not a bubble cut. There's no excess, right? So it fits perfectly. And I'm sort of popping it up to make sure I don't accidentally glue the 2 halves of that acetate together. And then there is more of the boat that it has cut around. So I'm just going to wiggle my scissors in there and sort of tidy up the leftover acetate, okay? And I have this little piece that sticks out on the left-hand side. I didn't plan this on purpose, but that oar on the left isn't actually glued down to the acetate very well, and that's going to work out brilliantly for us. So I have my 1 piece of pattern paper that I'm gluing onto the right, and I'm butting that right up against where the box meets the back of the card, so I only have that margin on the right. And then this piece ultimately is going to end up all the way against the edge of that box, sort of the inner edge, if you will. But I want to glue my acetate down first. So I am using 1/2-inch score tape. This is the heaviest heavy-duty double-sided tape I have. And I am just going to remove that release paper and I'm going to set that down where I want the boat placed. Okay, it's hanging off the bottom. That's fine. We'll trim it later. Then a little bit more double-sided tape on top of that. You can use wet glue for this, but I don't have the patience. Okay, so we'll use both though, because I want to slide this underneath the oar of the boat, but above the acetate. This made my day. What a happy accident. I'm lining it up so it should fit perfectly on the top and bottom. I'll press it down. And then my boat, you can't even hardly tell that there's acetate back there. It's really just strengthening that boat that's hanging out over the water. I'm using my glue and then my little pokey tool to sort of spread that around to try to get that oar to adhere more thoroughly to the pattern paper. And then I'll press it flat and trim off the extra from the boat. And there it is. You can see how much dimension is back there. It just makes my heart so happy. For our sentiments, I'm using the rectangle sentiments from the Patreon version of this kit, and I will link to that Patreon post below if you're new to Patreon. I'll also leave a link to my tutorial for Patreon from when I launched it. And I am just cutting up and connecting the tick marks from top to bottom, but I'm leaving the header intact so that when I rotate, I still have the tick marks on the side to make sure that these are cut perfectly. This is the reverse page with white text on black. There is also a version of this page that is black text on white, especially if you have a printer that doesn't do a lot of solid black very well. So here's my sentiment, and it says, "Wishing you a year full of adventure." The front of this card is so organic that I didn't like the entirely rectangular shape. So I used my pencil and just sort of traced a bubble line around the edge on one side. Super easy, not any crazy fussy cutting, but friends, I have to draw a line. I cannot eyeball this, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I just know myself. I'm also going to come in with a black alcohol marker. I like the Ohuhu markers. I like the tip on these best, and they're pretty affordable. And I'm just going to go around the outside edge. If you don't have that, a Sharpie is also an alcohol marker. It will work beautifully. And then I'm bringing in one more piece of cardstock. I wanted just a little bit of dimension on this. So I traced around that edge and I will trim away. This is ever so slightly smaller than the sentiment itself. So a little bit of wet glue and I can sandwich those together. I think it just gives it a little bit more weight on the card. We have so much dimension going on anyway. I love for a masculine card that it is clean and simple, but there are surprising elements, right? Just because it's a masculine card doesn't mean it needs to be boring. So I have a piece that's 4 by 5 1/4 of white cardstock that I'll put on the back with removable adhesive. So I can just pull that off, write on it, and attach it back on there. It makes it a little bit easier to add my greeting. And our second card is finished. My friends, I cannot get over the boat hanging off the edge. I hope you'll give something like this a try. In the description box below the video, I've linked to the emergency card kit playlist that is full of free downloads, along with any supplies that I've used, and then a link into Patreon to download the files that I used today. If you've never been to Patreon before, there's also a link to my video tutorial for my Patreon. There's a free membership option. I'd love to have you join us. Thank you all so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.